Okay, so here's what happened. I made a build, and as I was making the build, I was writing a script. And then after I finished writing the script, I was like, well, now I have to make a video, because that's the next logical step. But then I made the video, and I read the script for about 15 minutes, but I didn't like it. I'm sorry. It was gonna be like a very formal, like step-by-step, how this build works kind of video, but like I finished it and I watched it back and it was just so dry and so ridiculous. So I'm just gonna sort of talk off the cuff over some invasion clips of this build I made, and I will just sort of talk about it and try to hit some points based on what was in the video. And I will also try to use visual aids as I talk. So this is Enchanter Rigel. He's kind of like a Cuckoo Knight that is too weak to use weapons, so he just casts spells. At least that's my lore explanation for why I'm not using any weapons. Originally, this was supposed to be like a test build on the theory that you could walk into an invasion with just an Azure staff and win 90% of the time. And that was fun for a little while, but then I got thinking, what if I optimize the hell out of this carry cross situation and just make something that's really powerful for once? And I've kind of already done the invasions with just Azure staff thing, so like we're kind of retreading old ground here, and I've never really done stuff with carry and cross, and I've always wanted to abuse the hell out of Slicer, so here we are. The idea I kind of settled on was making like a rushdown sorcerer, because I've never really done something specifically like that before, and I feel that we were very successful. Between Glint Blades and Slicer and running up and just throwing out Piercer, you have a lot of options in how to aggress onto a given opponent, which is nice. You get to do this sort of diving thing, like in a MOBA, where you like isolate a target and then you like unleash all of your cooldowns on them at once. It's a little like that, which made for a very fun, very fast, very fluid, close range style, as opposed to the kind of mid-range poking and zoning that I usually do. And I have to say, it was kind of transformational. In fighting games and Souls, I sort of always run a character with this neutral forward poking heavy style, as you can see through the sorcerers and such. But this was my attempt to do something mechanically distinct from that. There are still options for mid-range poking with the Glint Blades, but that's not the focus, and you're never going to win with just Glint Blades. The Glint Blades are there to accentuate your approach, your running slicer, your dive. As long as they don't run directly away, you have a way to safely approach them. And even if they do run directly away, you are still safe. And then once you close the gap and you're in on them, you get to do this whole mix-up thing with Slicer and Greatsword and Piercer, which is extremely fun and extremely powerful. My detractors may say that this is not very magey. There's not a lot of unique spell casting happening here, but that's okay. The interesting stuff is going on under the hood. While we're still early in the video and before I get ahead of myself, let me thank some people. Really getting my daily gratitude in here. Okay, so first off, SirGrayFox came up with the carry and cross thing. I'm not sure if they formally invented it, but they definitely popularized it. And that's kind of the crux of the burst of this build. Second, we're doing a lot of returning to 1, as was clearly outlined by A Book of Matches. Fabulous YouTuber. Check out that channel as soon as you possibly can and watch every single video. Very rich analytical content, very intellectual in how they approach the invader game plan. Cosimo Medicis, well, I just like Cosi. His content is mostly about fishing and backstabs, which I do also like and will visit more intently at some point in the near future. But they also use a lot of spells and Glint Blades and Dexint, so I think it applies here. I think Saint also made a build to this tune at some point last year. A lot of people have done like melee range sorcerers because you can now. Honorable mention to Rofo the Germ and the Germ's Respite Discord server with Philosophicity, Pawnshop Ghost, Spider Florist, Six Gummy Bears, Halo Pickle. There are too many of you. You know who you are. I'm just going to briefly touch on the stats because I know a lot of people are into that sort of thing. It's structured very similarly to any other pure caster I would make. Hit an int soft cap or hard cap, get as much vigor as you can get to not die in 2 hits, and then put the rest into mind and hope you have enough FP to cast all of your spells. We've got Graven Mass because that 8% sorcery boost isn't just an 8% sorcery boost, because damage multiplication is not additive, it's multiplicative. Stargazer for 5 int to hit that 60 soft cap, Radagon's Icon for cast speed, and then Bullgoats, which is a little unexpected, for just a touch more poise, which is very nice. Especially in situations where you're getting pelted by a bunch of tiny projectiles, being able to approach from mid-range and like tank a spell or an arrow is very helpful. I had versions of this build that took points out of mind and stuck them in endurance. I had versions with 2-headed turtle talisman. I had one with like 81 poise to try and test things out. Ultimately, I think the best version of the build is the one that had the most mind, because you could just keep swinging and not really have to worry about it, especially if you had a Starlight Shard active, which I usually did. I'm sure someone out there could make a bunch of tiny optimizations that would really take this build up a notch, but this is what I settled on and this is what I was comfortable with. I made 2 other versions, one at 138 and one at 200. Following similar principles, I just cranked it up to 80 int, and I distributed the stats into like mind, vigor, and endurance respectively. And from 90 all the way up to 200, the build felt almost exactly the same. One of the things that this build project has made me appreciate is threat ranges. What are threat ranges? It's the range you threaten, or are threatened at. Let's say this is Rigel. Rigel wants to get in close and stay there. But before he can do that, there are a lot of potential dangers he must navigate. Long-range options are numerous, but many of them won't kill you outright. This is the realm of Great Bows, Ballistas, Cannon of Haima, Ambush Shard, maybe Elden Stars, Loretta's Great Bow, Giant's Flame, Frenzied Burst, all of those. When at long range, you have the option to poke or attempt to move into mid-range. At mid-range, this is where things get a little dicey. It's probably not wrong to say that a lot of invasions end at mid-range. Between Star Shower, Ancient Death Rancor, and many Ashes of War, it's very possible to go from 100 to 0 in a matter of seconds. I would even say that a majority of dangers exist at mid-range. Almost all projectiles that were not already mentioned about long range fall into this category, and they're too numerous to name. But this is the threat zone that is outside of melee range, but way too close for a ballista to be practical. For reference, this is the space that most caster builds want to occupy. And then once you've navigated past Great Bolts and spells, you're finally in close range. Or melee range as most people call it, and this is just the range that your weapons reach. Everything from a dagger to a Zweihander to, in my opinion, the edge of a piercer is close range. I guess glint blades also technically count, but you have to cast those in mid-range to bring them into close range safely. And once Rigel can reach close range, ideally with some glint blades up, that's when the fun begins. A lot of the preparatory action is buffing and sort of looking for openings in that mid-range space so that you can find the perfect running slicer. I know overuse of slicer is very gauche or whatever, but it's my melee weapon in this build. Also, it only does like 40 poise damage, so like, who cares? From Slicer, we can mash more Slicer, we can throw out a Greatsword if we think they're gonna roll, and then from the Greatsword, we can combo into Carrion Piercer. If the latency is bad enough that the Carrion Cross does not connect, then we can roll catch off the Slicer with a Raw Piercer, which usually has enough active frames to catch just about any roll in that given distance. And because the recovery of Slicer is so low, there's another option, which is doing nothing or dashing back. You can be completely safe on a running Slicer even if you whiff, or you hit a block, or you think they're gonna swing with a poise weapon. It is really an astonishingly safe opener. I know this is old news, but I'm just kind of saying it here to detail the build. The overall strategy is very simple. Get a burst with the Carrion Cross and then chase down with Slicer, but there's a lot of little nuance in deciding how you go about doing that, especially when contesting other players. It's very simple to dive on a solo target. It is much more difficult to isolate and dive on one of 3 players. I do think that in aggregate, I faced mostly duos, though. So, in fairness, I was only fighting 3 players every so often. Fortunately, we have a plethora of Great Blades and Glint Blades. I know I basically only talk about how much I love Magic Glintblade as a spell, but I'm going to talk about it some more. I know I coined the term asynchronous pressure however many years ago, but I think it's time we scrap that now. It's no good. It's too wordy, it doesn't explain the concept properly. It sounds like something you'd read in a college textbook, so let's get rid of it. Instead, I'm calling them tandem spells or tandem attacks because you attack in tandem with them, right? Your actions are done in tandem with the action of the spell. Tandem, I think, communicates a synchronicity and a simultaneity. You're using them to have more turns at once at a given time. And the action economy of that is really good because you give up a bit of your turn, but then you use that to spawn the Glintblade, which then gets its own turn at some point in the future. You are, in essence, setting up your own gank with summoned ghost swords, which I think is really fun. What if I started naming my Glintblades? My left Great Blade is Patricia, the middle one is Denise, the right is Rachel, the first Magic Glintblade is Mark, the second Magic Glintblade is Donovan, and I really should never be casting a third Magic Glintblade. I do think you can overdo it on the tandem spells, and I try to limit myself to one Great Blade cast and one Magic Glintblade cast at a time before actually looking for an opening and approaching. And I mean, you can always cast more later. Magic Glintblade is pretty cheap. And I guess I should mention the buffs as well, because they are fairly important, unfortunately. So once I sort of get to the edge of mid-range, I try to pop 4 buffs every invasion, which seems like a lot, and it is, but the results are very good. I pop the Flask of Wondrous Physic with an Opaline Hard tier and the Magic Shrouding Cracked tier, then Pickled Turtleneck, a Great Blade cast, and then a Starlight Shard, usually in that order. Now, let's talk action economy again. All of those buffs take about 11 seconds to activate. It's not always possible to activate every buff in every invasion, and not every invasion is going to require 4 buffs. Nevertheless, the stamina regen on the Pickled Turtleneck and the FP regen on the Starlight Shards, it's just so good for you. And I think that most importantly, it really lets you be aggressive and have this rushdown style where you can go in, do a bunch of mix-ups, get a kill, and get out. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our supportive spells. I have 5 spells on this build that I don't really use all the time, if ever. Miriam's Vanishing is here for flavor, but you can teleport into range with Great Blades up and then cast an unreactable spell like Slicer, Greatsword, or Piercer, and that's a very strong play. Terra Magica is here for even more damage. It's not always necessary, and it's not ideal because I'm moving around a lot doing all of this running Slicer, but if you do have to hold a choke point, there is no better spell. Ambush Shard probably shouldn't even be here, but it's for max range pestering. I'm using it as a ballista replacement, and combined with Arrow's Reach, it can get pretty insane, the distances. It's not going to come up in 99% of invasions, and you would much rather be in close, aggressing, doing the mix-up thing, rather than poking. I think I've used Eternal Darkness 1 time, but I like the idea of it because it's an anti-tandem spell. It takes away your enemy's tandem risk. If you use it against the right players, it'll stop you from getting destroyed in that mid-range, and that kind of gives you license and room to approach. Hidden Body is good. I like using Hidden Body. It's a good way to stop yourself from getting shredded by reducing that lock-on range, which is yet another buff that you can stack on top of the other 4 buffs. Honestly, I forget I have these most of the time. The first 5 spells are so over-centralizing that I rarely need them. But in case the odd opportunity arises where I can make one of them work, I will try to use it. I want to get this more swords theory of sorcery going, which dictates that the party that can conjure more magic swords wins the invasion. It can be any magic sword, but you have to have more of them. 1 magic sword is not enough. Think 7, 8, maybe 9, all on screen at the same time and all pointed towards the same person, preferably. I know this directly contradicts what I said earlier about casting only 2 spells before going for my dive, but this is more important. I guess it's technically about casting more swords per second. Like, how many moles of Glintblade can you have in an invasion at a given time? More than 3. Okay, let's wrap this up and go for drinks. The real inspiration for this build is from Armored Core for Answer, which I was replaying for like the 4th time recently because I wanted to get all the S ranks, which I did with a number of different builds. Most of them were lightweights, close range, DPS things, and that's just kind of my preference nowadays. I'm trying to lean in on fast and aggressive here. Anyway, For Answer and Armored Core 4 have a mech called the Aliyah, which is a mid-weight, high-speed thing, and it comes with this little dagger laser blade called the Dragon Slayer, which is sort of like a little version of that game's Moonlight Blade. The Dragon Slayer kind of reminds me of Slicer, so I think of Rigel as a fantasy version of the mechanical ideas present in the Aliyah. Good defenses, lots of available energy, and a high-speed, close-range focus. And no, I'm not about to turn this into an Armored Core video, although that would be very funny to do halfway through. I do encourage you to play For Answer and Armored Core 4 for that matter. They're just great games. I just really like them. Also check out Psuedoregalia. It's kind of an older game now, I mean it's like a year old or something, but it's a really good 3D platformer, and it has some of the most fun movement of any game that I've ever played. I know I did this whole goodbye thing like last year, but you know, if I have the energy to make a video every now and again, I'll certainly try to. I just felt really compelled to make one about this build because it was just uncharacteristically fun for an Elden Ring build. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Use Great Blades responsibly, take care, viewer, and always have more swords.